one team that we will not get is the Spurs. They're not quite ready to be an NBA Finals team. I thought that was very apparent against the Bucks. I mean, it was probably one of Wemby's worst games we've seen since that early season stretch when he got off to a sluggish start first 10 games. Giannis just completely shut him out. Giannis was his typical dominant self, 25 points, 16 rebounds, 8 assists, and he defended Wemby a lot, completely locked him up, forced a turnover, 24-second violation in the second half. Wemby ended up with only 10 points on 4 of 10. He had 3 turnovers, and Tom, I was watching back the game again this morning before recording the podcast with you. And like, it's just amazing how many instances Wemby was just passive in this game. Like he had a play where AJ Green was on him and Giannis kind of shaded over to double, but then Wemby tossed it out of bounds instead of making like a spin baseline when he had a lot of room. There's a play he had Middleton on a post up and he just took a shot over him without even trying to make an aggressive move. There was a play in transition. Nobody in the paint. Wemby's bringing the ball up Giannis style. Nobody in the paint for the Bucks. And he just makes a terrible pass to a cutter instead of attacking into the paint himself, a wide open paint. So, I think on one hand, I watched this game and it's like Giannis is obviously more developed, has a better supporting cast at this point. San Antonio has surrounded Wemby with a bunch of gunners. Wemby was 5th on the team in shots, but it's also on Victor sometimes to take that initiative. He can't allow himself to be 5th in shots per game. And I felt like this was one of those games where that was pretty apparent. Both of those factors where Victor still needs to figure out that balance between scorer and playmaker, but the Spurs roster as well doesn't have a lot of those guys to help lift him up like Giannis does.
Yeah, what a great moment when Giannis locked up Wemby out on that perimeter play. I mean, those are the moments that it's just so fun to watch. And that's, again, how you market this NBA.
Greek freak and a French freak.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
And Giannis cared, man. He really cared about this matchup. You could tell that he wanted to crush Wemby. And I wrote the column that's saying that
he did.
He did absolutely crush him. And he followed through on that in ways that I think, again, we need players to care this much about a regular season game. And I think the whole lead up into the game, I wrote the column for Yahoo Sports that's saying like the future of the NBA is Wemby, and it's not Giannis, it's not SGA, it's not the Cavs. The people are so magnetically attracted to Wemby because of his on-court stuff, just the alien nature of his game and like pulling up for threes from 30 feet and then doing things around the rim we've never seen. And he has that like little scoop layup thing at the rim on Giannis, and then Giannis locks him up at the perimeter earlier, and it's just he can't do anything against Giannis. Amazing theater individually. But let's not ignore the fact that Wemby had the lowest usage rate game of his career. Last 2 seasons, he has not had a 16.6 usage rate in any game until last night in this matchup against Giannis, where Giannis just clamped him up tons of times. So 16.6% usage rate. What that means is he was on his team's possessions, only using 16% of the team's possessions to attempt to score. And that is a tiny number, especially in a national TV game against a team that was really struggling, moving Chris Middleton to the bench because he's dealing with ankle issues. And you're seeing Wemby really over-deliver in the Christmas Day game and thereafter. But this one was the first time in a long time I said, he looks like 20 years old out there, Kev.
Yeah, he did look 20 years old, and the Spurs still look like a young team too. I felt like watching those games back to back. You get to see OKC go into Cleveland, missing some key players, and they still are competitive all the way to the end, and it's an awesome game, clearly between 2 finals contenders. And then you watch the Spurs and the Bucks, and obviously the Bucks have been an up and down team this season, but they have an MVP candidate in Giannis. They still have some high level role players. Brook Lopez had a big game himself. And then you see the Spurs, and it just, in my mind, it really just showed how massive the gap is between OKC and San Antonio. Like when you think about that Chet Victor rivalry that hopefully brews. Hopefully we get a Thunder 1 seed, Spurs 8 seed round 1 series, but that series isn't going to be close. It's just not going to be close. The Spurs are nowhere close. They're not at all.
they need a guy to get to the cup. They had 30 points in the paint against this Giannis and Brook Lopez front line. And that's a really good front line when they're locked in, of course. But 30 points in the paint is atrocious. Second lowest of the season for the Spurs. And they're bottom 5 in drives per game in the NBA. The Spurs are. So they need a guy who can get into the paint, penetrate, and get the defense in a grinder so that things open up for Wemby, some attacking lanes. So he's not strong enough to just go right at Giannis as we saw in that game. He just doesn't have the strength. He like ISO. He's going to have a couple plays where you're just like, how did he do that? And it's because of that just dexterity and the length and the creativity. But they need someone, and this was the same issue that the Warriors had with Chris Paul, is they need someone to get into the paint and start that kind of rotational blender. And they don't have that guy right now. Steph Castle starting next to Vassell. And I like the look. I like the starting 5, but they still weren't able to get downhill and get the Milwaukee Bucks in rotation or push the ball in transition. They were raining from downtown. They took over 53 pointers, which isn't really their DNA, but I think it underscores, man, they really need a guy who can get to the cup. And dude, I'm telling you, we just did a big number with Dan Devine that dropped this week about the Sacramento Kings. I'm just saying, the way that the Kings have looked without De'Aaron Fox and the way that it's been kind of awkward with De'Aaron Fox this season, off the court, on the court, he's 4th in the NBA in drives per game, 4th. And the Spurs are bottom 5. I'm just saying, Kev. I'm just saying.
Look, I think Fox would be a nice acquisition for the Spurs. He definitely fits the profile of what you need next to Wemby. Nice downhill attacker, somebody who can get into the teeth of the defense, kick out, draw in, help, and create lob opportunities for Victor. I mean, look, no disrespect to Chris Paul. He has been helpful with making that offense at times look competent this season, but he is so far beyond his prime with his ability to get into the paint as an undersized point guard, as a guy who even in his prime wasn't somebody finishing at a high rate, high frequency at the rim. He's always been a bit more perimeter based. His tool utility of getting to the paint was to create for others. And he just can't get there consistently anymore. And that to me is a huge drawback for the Spurs offense, which, with Harrison Barnes and Devin Vassell and Stephon Castle and Keldon Johnson, these guys aren't playmakers. They're finishers. They're some of them are shot chuckers, Keldon Johnson. Mm-hmm. Like they need a point guard who can create and penetrate, and they also need a supporting cast that could be more like Cleveland's. Like, where's your Max Struses? Where's your Ty Jerome? Like, where is your Dean Wade? These are the guys that you need to surround Victor with. And over the course of time, maybe the Spurs are able to find those guys. But right now, the roster just doesn't make sense around Victor. They don't run enough through him. He's a better playmaker than he's given opportunities to show. And they don't have a point guard that can help elevate Victor to the level that he can with those 80% finishing opportunities that he should get pretty consistently. It just doesn't happen. It's rare you see Victor catch a lob. And for a 7'4" guy, it should not be a rare thing. And so the Spurs have a hell of a lot of work to do before they're just like, oh yeah, maybe we'll see a 1 versus 8 seed. Nice story against OKC in the first round. But we'll see if they even make the playoffs. That is not a certainty either.